Okay, so I shouldn't be talking now because I'm in the car, but you can see me, I guess. So when is Parag joining us?
Parag will join us within an hour or so.
Oh, okay.
Actually,
so you'll be.
I'm here already.
Oh, good.
Hey, Parag, hi. Can we have a look at you?
Okay,
so oh, great. I shouldn't be talking now because I'm in the car.
Yeah.
Same here. I parked the car to just catch up on you all. So now I'll probably. Guys, all the best.
I'm here already.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Can we have a look at you?
And Amol, Samira needs to start.
Yeah, sure. I'll stop.
I should be talking now because I'm in the car.
Yeah, sorry, can you just give me 1 minute? I'm just starting the meeting. Neha, you double. Sorry everyone for the little delay that we had and the technical glitch that was going on for everyone. So great. Can we please start, and I request all our guests to please keep be on mute so that it will help the speaker to continue well. So I kindly request all the guests to be on mute. Okay, so namaste everyone. On behalf of Bhavyata Foundation, I, Samira Shah, welcome you all for the session today, which is titled The Royal Indian Navy Uprising of February 1946 as a part of its project India Rising. So India First is one of our initiatives under which we are doing this session today. In 1946, India was on the verge of a tremendous popular uprising, one that might have resulted in genuine independence rather than a transfer of power. These arguments may be exaggerated, but the truth remains that the RIN revolution convinced the British that they could no longer rely on the Raj sword arm to protect them. So today, to discuss the same in greater detail and its connection with 1857 War of Independence and INA, we have with us Shri Commander Dhananjaya Joshi, ex-Indian Navy, who served on board ships such as INS Virat, Vikrant, and frigates as an electrical engineer. He retired from the Navy to join international education. He sets up the Pathways World School at Gurgaon and later headed the International Baccalaureate program at the Dhirubhai Ambani International School, Mumbai. He is a MTech, MBA, and MS scholar in the International Relations, an alumni of the Bishop School and the National Defense Army Academy. He joined the Indian Navy, and is of course born and brought up in the beautiful city of Bombay. His current areas of interest are Indic culture, painting, Indian history, and creating a modern context to our ancient stories. Dhananjay ji, it's our immense pleasure to have you join us and talk to us and share insights on this wonderful topic. And of course, along with him, joining us is also one more eminent personality, Shri Parag Tope, a descendant of the Tatya Tope and the author of the book on the Anglo-Indian War of 1857, Operation Red Lotus. So we are very happy to have you also, sir, with us. So I think without taking much of everyone's time, that we are all eagerly waiting to hear the topic today. Over to you, Dhananjay ji, for the naval uprising and war of Indian independence.
Yeah, namaskar everybody. And welcome Mr. Parag Tope. As I am extremely grateful to have Mr. Parag Tope on the show with us today, because large parts of today's presentation are based on his phenomenal book called Operation Red Lotus. So thank you, Parag, for being here. And we will need your expertise. We will need your expertise towards the end of the presentation when there's a question answer session that will be planned for later. Right. So thank you, Bhavyata. Thank you, Samira, for introducing me. And today, let us start. Yeah. So let us start. First, today is Shivaji Jayanti. And हम सभी को नमन करते हैं शिवाजी महाराज को नमन करते हुए आज याद करते हैं उनकी उन्होंने जो आर्मर की शुरुआत की है. He started the navy in India. Not many people are aware of the fact that the western coast remained free largely because of Shivaji Maharaj. And there are two more people that I would like to thank. Right, one is the late Shri Tope, and the other person on the right of your screen is Commander V.S. Pandit. Both these people have been eyewitnesses to the naval uprising of 1946. They were young men when the entire uprising, जो संग्राम हुआ, स्वतंत्र संग्राम हुआ, जो 1946 का स्वतंत्र संग्राम हुआ, so that they have been eyewitness to. उन्होंने अपनी आंखों से देखा हुआ है. वो वहां पर उन्होंने सहभाग लिया है, और they have also been a part of this entire uprising. So I want to thank Commander Pandit and late Shri P.K. Tope, who is the father of Parag Tope and my father-in-law. Right. Okay. Now the flow of the presentation will be something like this. The overall flow of the presentation will go something like this. First is, I want to spend some time today on explaining what's the difference between a nation and a country. भारतवर्ष और भारत देश में क्या अंतर है? आप उसको भारतवर्ष कह सकते हैं या राष्ट्र कह सकते हैं. राष्ट्र और देश में क्या अंतर है, ये हम सबसे पहले समझने का प्रयत्न करेंगे. और उसके पश्चात, after this, we would try to understand what's the difference between history and इतिहास. इतिहास का मतलब कुछ अलग होता है और हिस्ट्री का मतलब कुछ अलग होता है. तो इन दोनों में अंतर क्या है, ये भी हम समझने का प्रयत्न करेंगे. और उसके पश्चात जो है, फ्रीडम के बारे में बताएंगे, और फ्रीडम के बारे में थोड़े विस्तार से बात करेंगे. We'll speak about freedom with a little more emphasis on freedom. But at this point in time, I want all of you to imagine that we could have got freedom on 18 February 1946. We could have got freedom on that time, right? So we'll be discussing that. Then we look at the possible causes. इसके कारण क्या थे? जो स्वतंत्र संग्राम, जो नेवी का जो विद्रोह कह सकते हैं, तो इसका कारण क्या कारण हो सकता है? What could be the possible causes of the naval uprising? Right? Was it the unfinished agenda of the war of 1857? 1857 का जो स्वतंत्र संग्राम हुआ था, उसमें हमने हमारी कुछ उपलब्धि हुई थी. वो उपलब्धि जो थी, वो क्या अधूरी थी? और जो हमने 1946 में नेवल अपराइजिंग के समय क्या हमने उसे कंप्लीट किया? उसके बाद हम देखेंगे, पराग जी का एक कंसेप्ट है, ट्रायड ऑफ फ्रीडम है, तो ट्रायड ऑफ फ्रीडम के बारे में ये करेंगे. उसके बाद जो है 1857 हम कहते हैं, did we lose the battle, but did we win the war of 1857? And then we'll have the question and answer session with Parag. Right. So let me start off with the first thing. Does anyone want to give a view on this? That what could be the difference between a nation and a country? Does anyone want to give a view on this? You can unmute and then speak. What could be the difference between a nation and a country? So I'm trying to define that the difference between a nation and a country could go in three ways. First is our stories. Our stories which are passed down from generation to generation. These are our stories. They don't belong to anyone else. These stories of the Sri Krishna Janma or Ravan Dahan, these are the stories which are passed on for generation. हम पीढ़ियों से ये कहानियां सुनते आए हैं. तो एक राष्ट्र जब होता है, भारतवर्ष जब होता है, इसमें ये कहानियां जो है वो एक पीढ़ी से दूसरी पीढ़ी को बोली जाती है. मौखिक परंपरा है अपनी, और इस परंपरा के कारण these stories continue. And these stories continue not just in India, but they're there even in many other parts which were part of the Bharatvarsh earlier. For example, if you see this picture on your screen, at the moment, if you see this picture on your screen, this is Ramayana being enacted in Cambodia, right? So the difference between a nation and a country, a nation comprises of its stories. The second thing a nation might comprise of is our symbols. These symbols, we are aware that these symbols belong to these are our symbols. They are recognizable anywhere in the world as our symbols. And we know for sure that these symbols on the right are definitely not our symbols. These are definitely not our symbols. So do you see that a nation comprises of our stories, our symbols? We are aware that these are our symbols. So a nation could comprise of our stories, our symbols. And the third thing which I would want to say, what a nation comprises, is our customs. The Namaste, for example, or even our rituals of marriages. And we definitely know that these are not our customs. If we see this picture, we definitely know that these are not our customs. So could we have the definition of a nation as something that comprises our stories, our symbols, and our customs, rituals, kind of culture that comprises nation? Whereas, so this could have been our concept of a nation, Bharatvarsh, right, where these traditions still continue. As opposed to that, what is a country? A country is defined by geographical boundaries. It has got distinct boundaries. So, राष्ट्र और देश में अंतर क्या है, ये मैं आपको यहाँ पर बताना चाहता हूँ कि जो भारतवर्ष है वो उसका रूप जो है वो विस्तार, वो अपार इसका स्प्रेड है, और जो बाउंड्री के साथ बंधा हुआ है वो एक देश है. So a country is defined by boundaries, whereas a nation is defined, could be defined by its stories, symbols, customs, etc. So if we are clear about what a nation means and what a country means, we'll go on to the next. The next part was about history itself. Is there a difference between history and itihas? Is the question that I want to ask. Now, most of the time you say history, and especially when foreign authors write about history, they consider history as something that is dead, something that is over, it's done with, right? And there are all kinds of authors. There are foreign authors, right? There are commercial authors, and of course there are appointed historians, right, who write history differently. On the other hand, I would want to emphasize on itihas. Itihas, okay, let's look at what the foreign authors did to our history. They romanticized colonial history. For them, for all the foreign authors, India was a land of elephants, snake charmers. It was a land of Maharajas. It was the land of tiger hunts, right? So the entire colonial history, we have colonial history going like this. Oh, this is the land of Maharajas, the land of tiger hunts, the land of elephants, land of snake charmers, etc., etc. That's how foreign authors wrote our history. Whereas Our itihas means something that's a little different than that. इतिहास का मतलब होता है it happened, ये हुआ है, ये इतिहास हुआ है, right? And ये इतिहास का ये इतिहास जो है वो हमारी यादाश्त में है. It is in the living memory of our people. So the bigger question that Parag ji hopefully answers later on during the question answer session is, to whom does history belong? Does the history belong to the governments? Does the history belong to appointed historians? To whom does history belong is the broad question. For example, in India, in India, this man from Rajasthan probably remembers a story like this. अगर आप ये स्टोरी पढ़े तो ये दुंगापुर गांव की एक कहानी है, जहां पर स्टेट सोल्जर्स ने एक उनके टीचर सिंगा भाई उनका नाम था, उनको स्कूल से निकालकर मारा, और एक 13 साल की भील लड़की उसका नाम है काली बाई, उन्होंने अपने टीचर को छुड़ाने का अटूट प्रयत्न किया, and that small girl was killed. Now the stories of Kalibai are retained, are there in the मौखिक परंपरा of दुंगापुर, और ये राजस्थान का आदमी जो है उसको बहुत अच्छी तरह से ये कहानी अभी भी याद है. और अगर दूसरी ओर देखें, on the second hand, this woman from Tamil Nadu, for example, now she remembers an entirely different story or different history. She remembers Rani Velu Nachiyar. Who was Rani Nachiyar? We may not have heard of her, but in that 1780 to 1790 period, she became the first queen to fight against the British colonial rule in India. So this is the story of Tamil Nadu. So हमारी जो ये मौखिक परंपरा है, the oral traditions that we have, this keep our history alive, and therefore itihas to us is in the living memory of our people. It is not something that is dead. It is not something that we read about in books. It's something that's there in the living memory of the people. And therefore, connected with history is the topic of freedom. Right? And we'll speak, हम विस्तार से बात करेंगे, स्वतंत्रता के ऊपर विस्तार से बात करेंगे. But there's one thing we know, that there's definitely no application form for freedom. जो स्वतंत्रता होती है वो लोगों के खून पसीने और अल्टीमेट सैक्रिफाइस से आती है, वो कोई एप्लीकेशन फॉर्म से कभी भी स्वतंत्रता मिलती नहीं है. और इसी श्रृंखला में 18 फरवरी 1946, this was a picture of Mumbai. In 18 February 1946, INS Talwar, right? INS Talwar is the picture that you see on your right. And the picture, this is the entry to Kalba Devi area. This is the most famous picture of 18 February 1946. Now, what happened on that day? What happened on that day was the English ensign, which you see on the bottom of your screen here, that came down from INS Talwar, and what went up was the Azad Hind flag of INA in this. So those of you who are in Mumbai, can you imagine what was happening at that point in time? What was happening at that point in time in Mumbai? Right? The entire stretch, imagine from the Radio Club, Taj Mahal Hotel, the Yacht Club, Lion Gate, the old Reserve Bank of India building, and all onwards, there were so many ships whose guns were pointed towards the government buildings. All these were government buildings those days. The ships had their guns pointing towards the government buildings out there, and that shook the British Empire. And if we were to make the mistake of thinking that this was limited to Mumbai, the answer is no. See all those red dots there? Right from Myanmar to Chittagong to Port Blair, Kochi, Karwar, Mumbai, Gwadar in Pakistan now currently, to even Djibouti, the mouth of the Suez Canal, the Gulf of Aden. That was the extent of the naval uprising. So again, this begs the question, like in 1857, that wasn't this something that was planned? The usual answers that are given for the naval uprising is, oh, the naval ratings are not treated well, there's bad food, and all such kind of things. Is that really true? Or was it a planned, coordinated movement? But it's certainly, you have to understand the magnitude of it. There were 78 ships that participated in this, right? Ships and shore establishments. There were 80,000 people in Kolkata alone and another 20,000 in Mumbai. And they were not just men in uniform. They were not just men in uniform, but they were people from the railways, the police, the Air Force, the firefighters, so many civilians that took part in all this. So when you had 78 ships pointing their guns at government offices in all the areas that I showed you, that really shook the colonial powers. And this was the scene in Mumbai where finally tanks had to be brought in. All the tanks rolled on the streets of Mumbai because the naval ratings, right, were so keen on this uprising and to throw out the naval, to throw out the British power at that point in time, that tanks had to be called in. And the leadership was so scared that finally Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel had to be called in. And he said the famous words to which Shri P.K. Tope is eyewitness to. And he said there grandly, Azadi to ab chand dino ki baat hai. On 24th February 1946, he has said these words at Azad Maidan, to which my father-in-law is the eyewitness to hearing him. Okay, so this is as far as what happened. Now let's review some of the factors. Why did this happen? This is what happened. Now let's deal with why did this happen, right? Now, before I forget, this was how Times of India described the naval uprising. They thought it was a thoughtless violence, but that's Times of India, right? So now let's look at the reasons why this could have happened. Why did this uprising happen? One of the first reasons is the INA. The INA march started in 1942-43. Netaji started from Myanmar. So the INA marching from there was a huge morale booster. When I met Commander Pandit recently, right, he was talking about, he was a young man in his 20s. He was talking about this huge influence of Netaji on the entire youth of the country. So when Netaji started marching from Myanmar in 1942-43, that's the time the youth of our country was so inspired that now Azadi is coming, right? That is what the mood was at that point in time. So you got to remember what the mood was at that point in time. Or look at the next factor. The next factor was this. Due to British policies, at that point in time, there was the classic Bengal famine, which was a man-made famine of 1943, in which 40 lakh people lost their lives. 40 lakh people sadly lost their lives. And remember, at that point in time, if you look at the rice production of India at that point in time, we had a surplus production and we were supplying rice to Japan. That was the kind of rice production, and Bengal had a famine in which 40 lakh people died. Does anyone even remember this number? 40 lakh people died in the Bengal famine of 1943, right? So this was a second factor. And the 40 lakh people dying was nothing new to the British policies, because they had tried this before in Ireland. They had created this potato famine in 1845. ये कोई नई बात नहीं थी उनके लिए. लोगों को मारना ये कोई नई बात थी. नरसंहार करना ये कोई नई बात नहीं थी ब्रिटिश लोगों के लिए. उन्होंने 40 लाख लोगों को भूखमरी से मरवाया गया है. Bengal famine was not natural, right? So if that is the case, Bengal famine, if it was not natural, this was another cause of the naval uprising of 1946. And let's look at the third cause. The INA trials that started. The most famous people, Major General Shah Nawaz Khan, right? This Major Prem Sehgal, Colonel Gurbakh Singh, right? Or Gurbakh Singh Dhillon, right? All these were, the Major General was charged with murder and waging war. So he was later on given the death penalty. So people thought it was absolutely unfair that INA trials opened in the Red Fort itself. So this could be one more factor for the cause of the uprising. And there are two more factors. The two other interesting factors are, right, the two other interesting factors become that many Indians had already fought, about 25 lakh of our soldiers had already fought the Second World War in different parts of the world, which was not our war, but they were war hardened. They were experienced in war. They knew how to wage war, and they had seen it in different parts of the world. So, which is the reason why they were more confident of being successful in the naval uprising. So that 25 lakh people had fought in the Second World War. And what was the last reason? The last reason was something like this. Can anyone see my screen, or is my screen blank? All right. People who are impatient with the leadership at that point in time. And surprisingly, Gandhiji was in he was in Mumbai on 18 February 1946. And the Times of India Bombay edition has said this. A huge gathering was present in the compound of Rungta House. Mr. Gandhi said his prayer. He did refer to the recent disturbances. Look at the use of the words, disturbances, recent disturbances and violence in Calcutta. And he asked the people not to divert from the path of peace. What's the point of throwing stones at the British? Isn't truth and non-violence enough to get you freedom? These were Gandhiji's thoughts on the naval uprising at that point in time. But remember, people were getting impatient with the leadership. And there was this duo which was more concerned with partition than anyone. There's one voice that stood out. And that voice, I don't know how many of you watching this presentation today recognize this brave woman. Her name is Aruna Asaf Ali. She was in open support of the naval uprising and said, yes, this is the way to freedom. So these could be the possible reasons. Just to recap, these could be the possible reasons. The INA had started its march. There was a Bengal famine which was generated by the British. Our soldiers were war hardened. They had seen enough of war in different parts of the world. And people who are definitely impatient with the leadership of the country. These could be the possible reasons why the naval uprising happened at all. But are there more factors to it? Yeah. Now what happened is, now the British left pretty hurriedly from that point of view in 1947. When they left within less than a year. So one of the thoughts that's being voiced is, did they fear a naval blockade? Because we were strong in all these areas. If the British had to leave, they would leave from Mumbai or Kolkata and go via the Red Sea and the Suez Canal back to the UK. So if that was the case, did they fear a naval blockade? It could have happened. So did they leave in a hurry? Is a school of thought. But more importantly, what interests me and where Mr. Parag Tope will come in is, the most important factor I had forgotten here. Many of you here wouldn't know that as a mark of respect to the naval uprising of 1946, the Ashoka Chakra in our flag, it's navy blue in color. It's never black. Many people imagine it to be black, but it's navy blue in color. And the reason why it's navy blue in color is a mark of respect for the naval uprising and the soldiers who laid down their lives in 1946 for freedom, which is the reason why the Ashoka Chakra is navy blue. Now, was 18 February 1946 an isolated incident? Or was it a continuation of something else? We have definitely seen what was the connect between the naval uprising of 1946, the INA march from 1942-43. Was there any other connection to it? And the connection comes from the question that I would want to ask is, the foundation of this was laid in 1857. In 1857, our quest for freedom started. So one question that I would want to ask is, that does anyone here remember how long did the war of 1857 last? Was it a few days? Was it a few months? Our history books, remember, go back to the appointed historians and commissioned historians and commercial authors and all that, right? They have tried to put a different narrative into all this. How long did the war of 1857 last? So this is the question. Now, the point that I am trying to say out here is कि 1857 का जो स्वतंत्र संग्राम हुआ था वो कितनी देर चला? 1 महीना, 2 महीने, 1 साल, कितने वर्ष चला? अगर हम छोटी सी भी प्लानिंग करें, अगर छोटी सी भी एक प्लानिंग की ओर देखें, अगर एक सोल्जर, 1 फाइटर, 1 सोल्जर, उसको अगर 1 किलो पर डे के हिसाब से अगर राशन लगता है, और अगर 50 सोल्जर ने लड़ना है फॉर 1 month, you would need 1500 tons of food alone. This is the most basic calculation. सबसे आसान अगर कैलकुलेशन करें तो ये अगर देखें तो 1500 टन सिर्फ खाना उनको लगता है। 1857 की स्वतंत्रता संग्राम की लड़ाई लड़ने के लिए अगर 1 महीना लड़ते तो अगर 1500 टन की जरूरत होती, खाने की जरूरत होती, then this the question is who planned it? उसका लॉजिस्टिक्स तो आज भी लोगों के पकड़ में नहीं आ रहा है, लॉजिस्टिक्स की डिलीवरी। तो who planned the logistics? And next is who funded it? इसके लिए खर्चा किसने उठाया? खर्चे का जिम्मा किसने उठाया? तो ये जो प्लानिंग है, ये हम करते करते ये पहुंच गए थे। अनेक साल पहले की बात है। पराग जी यहाँ पर इस मीटिंग पर है, उन्होंने हम सभी के योगदान से ऑपरेशन तात्या टोपेज ऑपरेशन रेड लोटस करके एक बहुत ही अनोखी किताब है, आप जरूर पढ़िए इसको। इसमें it took us 4 years of research and writing. About 55 plus battles have been fully analyzed in this with maps. They are proper military analysis of battles. This is not hearsay. And more than hundreds of Urdu letters that we came across were translated. And उसमें से जो अनुवाद के बाद उसमें से जो उपयोगी थे वो वहां पर लिखे हैं। तो ये बड़ी मेहनत से लिखी गई किताब है, ऑपरेशन रेड लोटस, and that discusses several other things. So now the remaining part of the presentation is largely borrowed from Operation Red Lotus, and therefore I am very happy that Mr. Parag Tope and Mr. Rajesh Tope are also here, right, who will be helping us with the question answer session after the end of this presentation. So इसमें पराग जी ये कहते हैं कि बहादुर शाह जाफर जो दिल्ली के आखिरी सुल्तान थे, मुगल सुल्तान थे, तो बहादुर शाह जाफर के जो पोते थे, ग्रैंडसन ऑफ बहादुर शाह जाफर, he made a declaration at a place in Uttar Pradesh, present day Uttar Pradesh, called Azamgarh. 25 August 1857 he made the declaration. उस declaration में उन्होंने क्या कहा? That we are getting very difficult times because of the taxation policies of the British. Trade को तो उन्होंने monopolize कर दिया था. De-skilling of workers happened, and there was massive economic discrimination and religious tyranny was happening at that point in time. मतलब अगर मैं इसको अनुवाद करूं तो टैक्सेस जो है वो भारतीय लोगों के लिए अलग थे, तो टैक्सेशन इतने ज्यादा हो गए थे तो लोगों को बहुत कठिनाइयों का सामना करना पड़ा टैक्स की वजह से। जो आपने लगान जैसे पिक्चर में थोड़ी बहुत इसमें से जो लगान की बात है वो टैक्सेशन में आती है। उसके बाद आता है ट्रेड मोनोपोली, जो हमारा व्यवहार होता था लेन देन का, उसमें वो उन्होंने मोनोपोलाइज कर दिया। हमारे जो कारीगर थे, वो कारीगर को अगर कारीगर के हाथों को काम नहीं दिया तो वो हाथ काम भूल जाएंगे। दैट इज de-skilling. And of course there was economic and religious discrimination. So these are the factors that he mentioned in the Azamgarh Declaration of 25th August 1857. So the reason, जो कारण बताए जाते हैं 1857 की स्वतंत्र संग्राम क्यों हुआ, तो खाना अच्छा नहीं था या कारतूसों में कोई प्रॉब्लम था, वो कारण कैसे हो सकते हैं जब बहादुर शाह जाफर के पोते ने आजमगढ़ में ये डिक्लेरेशन किया है, और ये सब एविडेंस इज ऑल अवेलेबल, इसका पूरा एविडेंस इज अवेलेबल. दैट इज सो देयरफॉर Parag has tried to say in this that freedom का एक ट्रायड बनता है. ट्रायड मतलब त्रिकोण बनता है. उसमें फ्रीडम 3 अलग अलग प्रकार के हो सकते हैं. क्या 3 अलग अलग प्रकार के फ्रीडम हो सकते हैं? एक तो आर्थिक आजादी आप कह सकते हैं इसे, इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम, देन देयर कुड बी पर्सनल फ्रीडम, एंड देन देयर इज पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम. There's economic freedom, personal freedom, and then there's political freedom. So what happened in 1857? Which of these freedoms did we win and which we did not win? And what happened later is, let's have a quick look at that. So uske pehle I would want to share with you the decline in the GDP of India when British rule came into India. You'll be surprised to know that once upon a time India had about 28 to 30% of the world GDP. ये जो ब्लू में नजर आ रहा है, so this is what we are talking about. We are talking about India having about 28 to 30% of the world GDP. And वहां पर अगर तारीख लिखी है, अगर तारीख में आप देखते जाओ, तो from 27-28% of the world GDP we were reduced to about 2% of the world GDP. And simultaneously have a look at West Europe. ये जो पर्पल में है, उनकी शुरुआत कैसी हुई थी और बाद में क्या हुआ. सो ये एक बहुत जरूरी स्लाइड है इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम को समझने के लिए. वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस, दैट वंस अपॉन अ टाइम वी हैड अबाउट 27 to 28% of the world GDP. Okay, not just this. Let's look at some other figures. The colonial regime looted $45 trillion. And this is a source I'm quoting from 2018. $45 trillion the British colonizers looted from India alone. And let's put this in perspective. What is the perspective? Today, UK's GDP is just 3 trillion. Is UK's GDP. In 2021, it was 3.4 trillion. This is what UK's GDP is today. So that is the extent of loot that we are talking about that the British colonizers did. Now, how did they do this loot? If this is the scale of loot, how did they cause this kind of long-term economic damage? One of the biggest factors here was the so-called land reforms of William Bentinck, which gave power to landlords, which gave power to the British Empire. The land vanished from us. And at the same time, long-term economic damage was also caused, and I make the statement that the East India Company was the largest drug-running cartel in the world at that point in time. नशीले पदार्थ की तस्करी करती थी ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी. ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी ने बहुत लार्ज पैमाने पर नशीले पदार्थों की तस्करी की है. This is the largest drug running cartel in the world at that point in time. Let's see some hard facts. Let's see some hard figures at that point in time. Let's look at this. Now, this graph out here shows us the area, the thousands of acres under opium cultivation. अगर आप पहले देखें, सबसे पहले अफगानिस्तान in 2006, कोलंबिया in 2006, कितने हजार एकड़ थे under cultivation, and 100 years before that in India in 1906, look at the amount of area which was under opium cultivation. About 600-700 हजार एकड़ opium cultivation के अंडर में था 100 years before Colombia and Afghanistan, which are kind of acknowledged to be the drug producing centers today. And ये जो पाउंड में फिगर लिखी है 1906 की जो फिगर है, जो उन्होंने ड्रग्स के कारण पैसे बनाए, 1906 की फिगर है. ये फिगर को तो मैं करोड़ों मिलियन में बोल भी नहीं सकता, इतनी बड़ी फिगर है. I don't know how to, it's 3 million, 35 million, it doesn't matter. But look at the extent. Look at the extent of money that the drug running cartel of the East India Company made in India in that period. Let's see some more hard facts. One hard fact, this chest of opium at that point in time, उसका वजन जो होता था, वो वजन, वो वहां पर लिखा है वजन कितना है, 160 pounds. 160 pounds एक chest opium का थी. Between 1854 and 1859, 70,000 chests of drugs were produced each year. Each one of those chests weighed 160 pound वजन की नशीले पदार्थ बनाए जाते थे, और इस प्रकार के 70,000 चेस्ट सालाना बनते थे 1854 1859 के बीच. एक चेस्ट की कीमत क्या थी? एक चेस्ट की कीमत, एक बक्से की कीमत उन दिनों में $2,075. Those days $2,075 पर बिकती थी एक बक्सा, नशीले पदार्थ का बक्सा. तो आप इसका हिसाब जोड़ दो, $145 million per year तो यहीं से बन गए. $145 million per year were made out of this itself. So now, if you look at this, ये नशीले पदार्थ जाते कहाँ थे? वो जाते थे चाइना. So if you look at this graph, look at the graph shooting up so steeply between 1835 and 1880. That is the extent of metric tons of drugs which were pumped into China via Hong Kong. So Hong Kong was the launching pad from where drugs would go, opium would go into China. And therefore, the king of China at that point saw his youth being ruined, and China, China fought 2 wars. I'll come to that. But look at this. Now, drugs were pumped into China. And what happened? The drugs went from India. The opium went from India via Hong Kong to Canton. And what came out from China was tea, silk, porcelain, all the fancy finished goods were taken away from there, and then they went to Britain at that point in time. So that was their kind of trade, so-called trade that was happening. So they call it trade. Right? So opium was pumped into the country, and tea, silk, porcelain, etc. went out to Great Britain. Right? At that point in time. This is a picture of an opium factory. Can you imagine this? This is an opium factory in India. This is what we are talking about. The opium balls being made and stored. This looks like from a science fiction movie, but this is a picture of from that time of opium factory in Patna. And China ended up fighting 2 opium wars in 1839 and 1856, right? Because their population was wasted like this. This is what their youth were reduced to. So we are still talking about economic freedom. So drug was one issue, right? We have dealt with drugs. And the second thing that Parag ji will speak more about is the entire de-skilling of our weavers. The balance of power shifted from the weavers. जो कलाकार थे, उन कलाकारों के हाथों से वो उनकी जो negotiation power थी, वो उनके हाथ से निकलकर सीधा ब्रिटिशों के हाथ में चली गई. और जो पूरी लॉजिस्टिक्स की चेन थी, इकोनॉमिक जो वैल्यू चेन बोलते हैं, उस चेन को पूरा अंग्रेजों ने मोनोपोलाइज कर लिया. सो द पावर शिफ्टेड फ्रॉम द वीवर. जो कारीगर था, वो कारीगर रिमेन मोस्ट लो पेड, राइट? Whereas he had the negotiating power at that point in time that Mr. Parag will explain, right? So ये जो बिचौलिया है, वो बिचौलिया आ गए बीच में इसके. पहले वो ताकत जो थी वो बुनकर के पास थी, वो बुनकरों से ताकत निकल करके वो गई बिचौलियों के पास. बिचौलिए कौन थे? British. They were the middlemen. So the power shifted from the hands of the weaver to the British, who essentially were middlemen. So that is how our long-term economic damage. Remember, we are discussing long-term economic damage. So long-term economic damage was caused by first drugs, Second thing, India was the capital of cotton. Cotton is king. There's one chapter in the book Operation Red Lotus. The entire chapter is titled "Cotton is King." Nobody in the world produced the kind of cotton that India did, and more important, not just producing the cotton, the kind of designs that were weaved by our skilled craftsmen. That this was sought after. हमारे बुनकर जो है उनकी जो कारीगरी इतनी प्रख्यात हुई थी, इनकी कारीगरी, कि पूरी दुनिया में इसकी डिमांड थी. पूरी दुनिया से लोग चाहते थे कि भारत में बुनी हुई आइटम हमारे यहाँ आने चाहिए. So from a luxury goods manufacturer, we, because of economic conditions, were reduced to supplier of raw materials. एक जमाने में हम लोग पूरी दुनिया को लग्जरी गुड्स देते थे, और अभी क्या बन गए? अभी we were only reduced to raw material supply, right? So this is as far as economic freedom is concerned, right? So लोगों के पास फिर क्या चॉइस रह गया था? लोगों के पास में सिर्फ दो चॉइसेस थे कि अपने ही जमीन पर लैंडलेस लेबर मजदूरी का काम करो. क्यों? क्योंकि बेंटिंग के लैंड रिफॉर्म्स के कारण उनकी लैंड तो अपनी रही नहीं थी, वो तो अंग्रेजों के पास चली गई थी जमीन. सो अपने ही जमीन पर यू वर्क एज लैंडलेस लेबर, और यू ज्वाइन द ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी एट 1/3 द पे. लोगों के पास और कोई चारा ही नहीं था, कोई और विकल्प नहीं था कि हम करें भी तो क्या करें, मजदूरी का काम करें, क्योंकि लैंड ओनर तो कोई रहा ही नहीं था, किसान तो कोई रहा ही नहीं था. नहीं तो अंग्रेजों की आर्मी को ज्वाइन करो, वो भी 1/3 पे में, 1/3 पे में. जो गोरा आदमी कमाता था उसके 1/3 या 1/4 पगार हमें दिया जाता था, और अंग्रेज आर्मी ज्वाइन कर दी. सो यही चॉइस था पीपल का, लोगों के पास. सो दिस इज एज फार एज इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम इज कंसर्न. नेक्स्ट आई वांट टू गो टू पर्सनल फ्रीडम. व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट पर्सनल फ्रीडम, उसमें सबसे पहले नाम आता है थॉमस मैकॉले. थॉमस मैकॉले ने अपने एजुकेशन सिस्टम, हमारी जो पढ़ाई की जो नीति है, पढ़ाई की नीति को लॉन्ग टर्म डैमेज पहुंचाया है. मैं ये पढ़ के सुनाता हूँ, जो लोग सुन रहे हैं और देख नहीं रहे उनको मैं पढ़ के सुनाता हूँ. दैट आई हैव ट्रैवल्ड अक्रॉस द लेंथ एंड ब्रेड्थ ऑफ द कंट्री एंड आई हैव नॉट सीन वन पर्सन हु इज बेगर और थीफ इन दिस कंट्री. मतलब मैं बहुत इस देश में घुमा हूं, और इस देश में मैंने कभी कहीं भी मैंने कोई भिखारी नहीं देखा, ना कोई चोर देखा. इतने ज्यादा मॉरल वैल्यूज के लोग हैं यहाँ पर. नाउ we would conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is our spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore I propose that we replace our old and ancient education system, a culture. For if the Indians think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than the own, they will lose their self-esteem. They will lose their culture and will become what we want them to become, a truly dominated nation. अगर मैं इसमें हिंदी में अनुवाद करूं तो वो कहते हैं, थॉमस मैकॉले कहते हैं, उनके पार्लियामेंट में, ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट में कहा, उन्होंने 1835 में ये बात कही है कि अगर भारत के ऊपर हमने राज करना है तो वो एक ही तरीके से हो सकता है कि उनकी जो शिक्षा की प्रणाली है, शिक्षा प्रणाली जो है, वो शिक्षा प्रणाली को हम बदल डालें. शिक्षा प्रणाली हम बदल डालें, वो उनकी सोच बदले, कि सोच ऐसी बदले उनकी कि वो हर जो वेस्टर्न, जो पाश्चात्य चीजें हैं, उनकी ओर उनका ध्यान आकर्षित करे, कि उनको लगे कि जो पाश्चात्य विचार है वो हमसे श्रेष्ठ है. अगर वो हमसे श्रेष्ठ है तो हम उनको पूरी तरीके से उनको डोमिनेट कर सकते हैं, अपना वर्चस्व उनके ऊपर दिखा सकते हैं. ये सोची समझी राजनीति थी उस समय की. और एक आदमी है, मतलब अगर हम देखें कि व्हाट वाज द सिचुएशन ऑफ एजुकेशन इन इंडिया एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम. इन 1830 जॉन एडम्स नाम के एक आदमी ने बंगाल में अनेक स्कूल का सर्वे किया था, और उन्होंने देखा कि सिर्फ बंगाल में 1,50,000 से ऊपर पाठशालाएं थी, सिर्फ बंगाल में. फिर अंग्रेजों ने क्या किया? ये जो पाठशालाएं चल रही, सिर्फ बंगाल में अगर 1,50,000 से ऊपर पाठशालाएं थी, सबसे पहले अंग्रेजों ने इन पाठशालाओं को बंद करवाया। और यही उन्होंने आयरलैंड में पहले भी किया है। Same thing was done during the potato famine in Ireland. They shut down the schools because they wanted to kill the language. Not only this, how else did they affect personal freedom? Look at this. Printing of all local language books was banned. So आप अपनी मातृभाषा की किताबें पढ़ ही नहीं सकते थे, उनको प्रिंटिंग ये बैन हो गया था। इसीलिए ये प्रिंटिंग बैन होने के कारण they said that only European literature will be taught. आज तक हमारे स्कूलों में मैकबेथ पढ़ाया जाता है या जो भी है, लेकिन ये पढ़ाने से हम अभी भी हिचकिचा रहे हैं। और इसीलिए हमारे बच्चे सिर्फ घर में हमारी कहानियां सुनते हैं, जो हमारी मौखिक परंपरा है। स्कूल के एजुकेशन सिस्टम में ये चीजें नहीं है, और ये चली आ रही है 1830 से चली आ रही है। प्रिंटिंग ऑफ ऑल लोकल लैंग्वेज बुक्स वाज बैंड, ओनली यूरोपियन लिटरेचर टॉट, none of ours. Not just this. He's writing to his father and he's saying no Hindu who has received an English education ever continues to be sincerely attached to his religion. If our plans for education, अगर हमारी शिक्षा प्रणाली को हम अच्छी तरीके से फॉलो करें, तो बंगाल में 30 सालों में कोई हिंदू नहीं रहेगा। ये एक सोची समझी रणनीति है। These are facts which I'm placing before you. These are statements which are available, publicly available. This has gone as a letter from India to his father there. Not just this. These are the pictures of that time. Right? Large scale conversions to Christianity were taking place. Not only that, later on, there was a law passed that whenever missionaries went to village, they would receive police protection in case people beat them up. So therefore, it caused reverend sharing. उस समय का एक यहाँ पर जो काम करने वाला था, this country of 200 million has been claimed by the church. The whole land has been shaken by missionaries. The Hindu trembles. ये कांपते हैं, हिंदू और मुस्लिम कांपते हैं हमारी आने से। ये यहाँ पर वो खत में लिख रहे हैं, उनके डायरी में ये एंट्री है, रेवरेंड शेरिंग नाम के आदमी जो है। तो धर्म परिवर्तन चल रहा था, तो पर्सनल फ्रीडम का, हाँ, सो ये मैं कहता 1850 में एक लॉ पास हो गया था कि मिशनरीज जहां जहां जाएंगे उनके साथ पुलिस जाएंगे साथ में, ताकि उनकी सेफ्टी वो अपना प्रसार कर सके। राइट? सो देयरफॉर वी हैव स्पोकन अबाउट इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम and we have spoken about personal freedom. So 1857 की लड़ाई में हुआ ये है कि हमें 1857 के स्वतंत्र संग्राम के बाद हमें इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम मिला और पर्सनल फ्रीडम मिला, लेकिन पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम तो अभी भी नहीं मिला था। So from East India Company, what happened? 1857 के बाद में क्या हुआ? ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी तो यहाँ कंपनी के नाम से चली गई और रानी की सरकार आ गई, हर मैजेस्टी की गवर्नमेंट आ गई यहाँ पर। सो ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी वेंट एंड हर मैजेस्टीज गवर्नमेंट केम। सो 1857 में इकोनॉमिक फ्रीडम जरूर मिला था और पर्सनल फ्रीडम भी मिला था, लेकिन हमें पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम नहीं मिला था। तो इस पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम के लिए क्या आईएनए की जो नेताजी का जो प्रयास रहा, और उसके पश्चात जो 1946 में जो नेवी का प्रयास था, क्या वो पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम के लिए अपने अटूट प्रयत्न जो चले हैं 1857 से चले, उससे पहले भी चले हैं। तो ये जो प्रयत्न हमारे चले हैं, दिस इज वन कंटिन्यूअस थिंग, इट इज नॉट isolated events as the narratives of history try to tell us that these are isolated events. Oh, this happened sporadically, it happened, it just spread. How can something spread? Like, go back to the slide where I said that even if we consider 1 kg of ration per soldier per day and they fight for a month, still you will need 1,500 tons of food. Who paid for the food? Who planned the logistics? Yeah, ऐसे थोड़ी होता है कि things, most of the books written by English authors say, okay, it started in Meerut and then it spread. अब ये कोरोना वायरस जैसे स्प्रेड थोड़ी होता है, किसी को तो प्लानिंग करनी पड़ती है, पैसे खर्चे करने पड़ते हैं. So therefore, I will stop at saying that economic freedom we achieved in 1857, personal freedom we achieved in 1857, and political freedom was yet to be won in 1857. And for that, we've seen a continuous struggle, which later on came in, which was led by Netaji. And later on, the naval uprising was responsible to give the biggest jhatka probably to the British government at that point in time, after which we got freedom. And therefore, yeah, does anyone remember grease cartridges? Remember, this was the reason which was given for 1857, grease cartridges. Just for the record, 1856, February 1856, mein, Enfield rifles came to India and Barrackpore. But in January 1857 only, that military secretary said all cartridges should be free of grease. There's no grease cartridge, etc., etc. So 1857 के कारण क्या grease cartridges थे जो हमें हिस्ट्री में जो हमने नहीं लिखी थी, वो इतिहास हमने नहीं लिखा है, वो अंग्रेजों ने जो हमारा इतिहास लिखा था, they gave us this as the reason for the war of 1857. Oh, it was because of grease cartridges. So now hopefully I have finished with this. Jai Hind to everybody. I have finished my part of the presentation, and I would hand back to Samira, and Samira will conduct the question answer session with Parag ji also. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, and thank you, Dhananjaya ji, for such a insightful session. It was really, really very helpful, I'm sure, for all of us. And we have been having a lot of conversations coming up on the chat. That is, many people have given their insights and, feedbacks on the various pointers that you actually enriched every one of us with. So yes, Parag ji, can we please have you also? He's already with us, right? So
yeah, he's there with us. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. So how do you want me to, if there are any questions, the audience could definitely please put them on the chat box. Meanwhile, I think Parag ji, it would be great to have you, just give us a little startup or say a few words, and then meanwhile, I'll have the questions coming in.
Sorry, can you repeat what you just said, Samira?
No, I just wanted you to take over. Maybe if you have some pointers or some highlights to share with us before the questions, which are definitely coming in the chat box, I could start with.
Sure. There's, I think, one thing that Dhananjaya mentioned that I will be referring to was about the situation of weavers in the 1800s. So that's something which, in terms of economic freedom, Dhananjaya referred to. So just to kind of elaborate on what Dhananjaya said, India probably is the only civilization where we had a highly decentralized manufacturing system. So India was a highly industrial society, but unlike other industrial societies, our industrialization was highly decentralized. That means manufacturing of all aspects was decentralized geographically. Villages were not just for agriculture, villages were actually industrial hubs. And the transportation was through different ports, and we were in a net export nation. This was all the way until the 1800s. And this highly decentralized form of manufacturing is again a very unique Indian model, where no worker was, quote, an employee of anyone. That means all our workforces, manufacturing workforces, were independent workers. A weaver's family would not be reporting or would not be a slave or would not be an employee of anybody large industrialist. That model was completely alien to India, even up to the late 1700s, early 1800s. This form of manufacturing gave a tremendous negotiating power to our manufacturers in all areas of production. My area of focus in the book was textiles, because textiles dominated probably 50% of global production in that period. So typically, for example, there's an example which I forget which book I referred to, but they had done an extensive research of weavers in South India. Typically, a weaver in South India in the early 1800s would get a deposit from the local merchant. The merchant would say that, okay, I have a roughly a demand for so much cotton. Here's a 50% deposit. Can you deliver me this much cloth by so much time, right? And then when the date was met and the quality was satisfactory, the remaining 50% was given. Now, the reason why this form of negotiating power was high with the weavers was because the merchants were not able to bully the weavers into submission into their particular form of a contract, because it was a free market. When the British monopolized trade, all these merchants essentially became directly, they had the authority of the state. The police force was with them, and they reduced the number of merchants from several dozen in a village to maybe 3 or 4 or maybe just 5 merchants, and who were typically relatives of each other. So that means a weaver was no longer able to sell their cotton, sell their textiles to anybody else. So the negotiating power changed, and instead of a 50% deposit, it became a loan, an interest-bearing loan. And then the weaver would be having, and if for any reason the weaver was not able to deliver the goods, the interest would keep growing and they became indebted to the merchant. So the economic power of the weavers decreased dramatically. And so in 1857, when our leaders made the proclamation for freedom, and then they said that the economic power, the monopoly of trade has impoverished Indian weavers, they were specifically referring to this complete loss of freedom over probably about 2 generations that India faced. And that form of economic model is something which was again very unique to India. And that was a huge loss to India. And by 1857, pretty much India was at its poorest in history. I think that's the only thing, Dhananjay, you were referring that I would be discussing, right? Was there anything else I was supposed to talk about?
No. I just wanted you to expand on that, because that is a very important event which people have missed. Right. That this was our history. This was the way our economy was run. It was a highly decentralized kind of an economy which ran, and how this was systematically destroyed to cause long-term economic damage, right?
Makes sense.
To India. And there's another very interesting question I see by Dr. Amol Hule, which says that, so the narrative that has been spun all along in our history books or in our history texts is, oh, we lost the Battle of 1857. So do you think that this narrative is wrong, or was the entire thing about narratives? Because I think you have been speaking recently about narratives also.
Right. So there is one thing I'd like to correct, Dhananjay, in your presentation, is that 1857 we did not win economic freedom. The English continued to plunder us. So what Tatya Tope's last run, so when he crossed the Narmada in October of 1858, that's when the British realized that there's a potential of 1857 expanding into an all India war. And that is when the British, on 1st November of 1858, the British made an important declaration. What they did was they simply blamed all these atrocities and all these things on the East India Company. They said, we're going to shut down East India Company. They said that all the conversions, all the religious freedom, assaults on religious freedom, the assaults on Hinduism, the conversion laws that East India Company had passed in 1851, all these laws, they blamed it on the East India Company and shut the East India Company down. And then they promised that the crown will no longer interfere in the matters of religion. And that was an important victory for India, because that was something which enabled, for example, social gatherings. The British never allowed men to gather together. So there was always a anti-loitering. I think Penal Code 420, so 400 BC, and all those various codes were to prevent men from gathering, except when it was
144. So section 144.
144, yeah, right.
Section 1. So there was no question of chai pe charcha.
Right, exactly. So the idea was to prevent any kind of a gathering by men. And so the loophole was used by people like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, where he said that, okay, we're going to use, because the British are afraid of interfering in religion, we will allow men to gather, and this huge Ganesh Utsav where you had men dancing, and the idea was this was a very militant form of Ganesh Utsav that we kind of reinvented to kind of reimpose our will, and yet not have the British do anything about it, because that was one thing they were afraid of, was let's not poke the elephant. Let's not poke the elephant, because that was something which, so that allowed the elephant to lie asleep but still be alive. So if there was something that we won in 1857, was that our traditions and Hindu religion, Hindu ideas were not completely destroyed. We were able to keep them in a state of, if not coma, but at least some level of aliveness. So then in 1946, we were able to reclaim that. So we were able to reclaim some part of political freedom, some economic freedom, some personal freedom, and that journey continues even in 2022. I would say even in 2022, we are not fully there yet. There's still many things which are of foreign origin, political, even our political system, even our economic system, and even there is interference from the state, even today, in our personal system. So hopefully, but the process is ongoing. Today we can say that we do have Swaraj. That means we are now in a potential to define our political systems, our economic systems, and our personal systems. So I think that potentially answers Amol Hule's question.
Does that answer your question, Amol?
Amolji, you can unmute yourself for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Parag ji, and thank you, Dhananjaya ji, for answering my question and clearing my doubt. And there are many questions around it, and I am interested. And this session has triggered me to read the thought process that I should read this book, the Operation Red Lotus, in detail and study it in order to understand and take lessons so that we can contribute for the betterment of the country, nation.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, in the chat, for sure, we don't have any questions, but I'm sure many in the audience had a lot of feedback or comments, or would probably want to interact.
Rameshji has raised his hand.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe Rameshji, you can also unmute and have a conversation.
Yeah. Good evening, Dhananjaya ji and Parag ji.
No.
I'm sorry I missed your session. I have joined recently and heard 2-3 lines from your mouth. My question is that you were referring to that in the first war of independence, that is 1857. Our Sanatan values or Hindu values could be kept intact, and that was repeated in 1947, and that we are seeing in 2022 also. But my question is that our great nation country was divided on religious grounds, and the Muslim population is increasing, is on increase, and our birth rate is called the Hindu rate of growth, which is very low in compared to their growth rate. And in many parts of the country, this Muslim population has increased 50%, more than 50%. And it is said that when they grow in numbers, they call for this separate nationhood, separate Sharia for them and whatnot. So how this Hinduism can be revived effectively so that our country is, we don't see the pain of division once again. And that's my concern.
That's a great question. I think there's a very short answer to that. Just 2 words. Ghar Vapsi.
Sir, it is easier said than done. Because
that's all we should have time for. So in terms of execution, remember, we are a civilization that potentially we say 7 manvantaras, and if a manvantara is 25, 25,000 years. That means we potentially have a history of 175,000 years. So उसमें 10-20 साल 50 साल, you know, here and there. Answers are not easy. We have done this before. We have fought before, and we will we have won before. Let's not prolong this into a different discussion. But it's an important civilizational question, and I think the answer is Ghar Wapsi. And I know, I'm confident that over time, at some point in time, don't know when, at some point in time, we will be in a position to address concerns that you have.
Sir,
and a lot of people have.
Sir, one thing.
I think Ramesh ji, can we take on the next question, please?
Yeah.
Huh?
Actually, it's a long discussion.
Yes, it's a long discussion. It's a long discussion. Thanks for asking this. I think Parag ji has answered your question as well. But there's Sandeep Shetty who is asking another question. Samira, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, or you could, but I'll just read it out for you. It is that, was Congress formed as safety valve by British to avoid 1857, like a war of independence? That's his question. Sandeep ji wants to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you could, the short answer would be yes. In the 1880s, see, one of the things that the British did once the East India Company was shut down, the British throne and India was handed over to the British throne. The whole notion of progressive idea, rather than using Christianity as a form of control, the idea was to say that progressivism, that became the new religion, that became the new mantra. And progressivism essentially was a direct assault on anything Sanatan. Even today, even in 2022, the biggest enemy we are fighting, and that's where I would disagree with Ramesh ji to an extent, is the biggest enemy is not what he thinks it is. The biggest enemy today is the Church of Progress. The Church of Progress and all previous churches, Christianity, all Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam and Judaism and the Church of Progress all roughly come under the same umbrella. And they have one common enemy, and that is Sanatan. So we have been attacked at multiple levels, in multiple directions, at multiple times. And yes, we are fighting from a position of strength today compared to at least 50 years ago, and much more strength compared to 150 years ago. But yes, we are being attacked, and that is something which is very, very important. So anything that the British created, for example, the creation of the Indian National Congress in the 1880s, was a different form of creating control over us. And that would be via the idea of saying that progress directly counters Sanatan. So yes, so that is something which remains a battle line today. And the foot soldiers may have a different religion, but the intellectuals and those who are at the top of the pyramid definitely belong to the Church of Progress.
Parag ji, I could not complete my question.
Okay.
One moment, ma'am. Actually, this is what I was going to say, that the biggest enemy of Hindus are the Hindus. And we have heard na kuch baat aisi hai ki mitti nahi hasti hamari. This was sung by Iqbal. Earlier he was a patriot, but he turned, and then he changed his belief, and he was one of the most what you say, one of the proponents of Pakistan. तो बाद में तो उन्होंने चेंज कर लिया. लेकिन क्या है कि we ourselves are the guilties of this, क्योंकि हम लोग अपने बच्चों को कॉन्वेंट भेजते हैं, इंग्लिश मीडियम स्कूल में भेजते हैं, उनको जो है वो इंग्लिश कल्चर और ये सब और ये वेस्टर्न कल्चर वगैरह देकर देते हैं. तो वेयर आर आवर ट्रेडिशनल वैल्यूज? हम उनको वैल्यूज कहाँ से देते हैं? ना तो उनको स्कूल में मिलते हैं, ना उनको हमारे स्कूल घर में मिलते हैं. बच्चे अपने जो है नर्सरी टाइम में इंग्लिश वाली पोएम बोलते हैं तो हम लोग खुश होते हैं, या इंग्लिश मैनर्स जो होते हैं उनको वो देखते हैं या करते हैं तो उनको खुश होते हैं. तो दैट इज लॉस्ट. And
Ramesh, if you have a question, please ask a question rather than,
no, sir.
make it into a commentary, please.
Sir, no, I'm not questioning, but my question is this. हाँ, ये घर वापसी सर कैसे होगी? ये तो हम लोगों को करनी पड़े. We have to realize ना, ये मेरा बोलने का क्वेश्चन, जैसे उन्होंने बोला ना कि मैं डिसएग्री करता हूँ. Yes.
रमेश जी, अभी और भी प्रश्न लेने हैं.
Sure, sir.
और भी लोग, सो कृपया मैं एक दूसरा प्रश्न ले लूं. वो अशोक प्रताप सिंह ने एक अच्छा प्रश्न पूछा है. अशोक प्रताप सिंह ये कह रहे हैं, Parag, what he is asking is, Ashok Pratap Singh is a dear friend, is living in Europe now, somewhere I think in Norway he is living, right? And I'm happy that Ashok Pratap Singh has joined us today. He says that yes, the process has started and many people are raising their voice, but why is there so much resistance from the political class in reforming all our police rules and judiciary rules? And why is there so much of resistance from the political class in the reforms that are overdue, which we actually inherited from the British? So why is there so much political resistance?
I mean, I prefer not to get into politics, and that's the reason why. But I'll give a general, a broad answer. Broad answer to that is, at a core of Sanatan values is the belief of transformation, not revolution. So any change which is dramatic, and any change which is dramatic and potentially can be very disruptive in a negative way, because there is a certain status quo that is achieved even when a foreign rule comes. There is a certain new level of things that come into play. The rule of law, the concept of rule of law is very alien to our culture. But you can't suddenly say that, okay, we're going to get rid of the concept of government's authority. Even in the 1800s, the British acknowledged that India was a functioning anarchy. That means because we did not have centralized authority. But today we do have a central government. Does it mean that we give up our central government? Absolutely not. That means we still have a central government. We still have state governments. These were structures that exist. They give India a sense of continuity. Transformations will happen. Everything that needs to happen will happen as long as we still have Swaraj, as long as we have an autonomy to make changes. Over time, things will happen. Yes, the pace at which things will happen may not be as quickly as we want, but like I said, there's one thing that we as a civilization have is infinite patience, because we are the only ancient living civilization in the world. Yes, all these things need to happen. They will take time. And rather than saying that why is the political class resistant, the question is that, is the society ready for a rapid transformation, or do we want a slow transformation? My answer is that in general, people prefer slow transformation rather than revolutions, because revolutions are not healthy for a civilization. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just want to continue in that vein, Parag. And the question that I would therefore ask is that, most of our younger generation needs to be made aware of this history, which has been kept away from us. What is the best possible way of making the younger generation, the next generation, aware of our history?
So one of the standard answers that, especially as India is becoming more nationalistic, one of the standard answers is looking up to the government and saying that, okay, the government should do this and the government should do that, right? So my answer is that the journey is already started. What Dhananjay, what you, me, Rajesh, Rupa, and all of us did was just something which is important, that society in its own form should take ownership and say that, okay, we are responsible for our culture, we are responsible for preserving what's important, and let's not wait for PhDs and people from Jawaharlal Nehru University to do research for us. The answers lie within us, and I would say that we are definitely at a period where so many Indians have started taking ownership of our past, and we are doing a lot of research. Non-specialists are entering this field of history. Our culture, there is at least a beginning of new respect for traditions, and if we continue doing that, things will, the reversal will automatically continue, and hopefully at whatever point in time, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll be in a position to assert our identity and ideas.
Yeah, I'm sure. Dhananjay ji and Parag ji, would you want to continue? I have just one last question, which is actually from Sandeep ji, or we can take it that way, or would you have some more conversation ahead between both of you?
I think if there's anyone else who wants to ask a question and not typed in a question, if do you want
so
to
we can
open
have
it for
Sandeep Shetty ask the final question, because that's come up on the chat.
Yeah, that can happen a little later. But is there anyone else? Is there anyone else who would want to ask a question that pertains to 1857 and 1946, the naval uprising and things like that? So, is there any question that someone would want to unmute themselves and ask? And then we'll take Sandeep's question then. जी कुमरेश जी,
प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं हम?
बिल्कुल पूछिए जी, पराग जी को।
ऐसा है, अभी आपने यंगर जनरेशन का संदर्भ दिया था, तो जहां तक मेरा विषय और आप लोग भी मेरे लिए तो यंगर जनरेशन ही है। ये बताइए मेरे को भाई, हम जो है चाहे मुगल साम्राज्य के समय या ब्रिटिश साम्राज्य के समय, जब उससे पहले हम इतने तगड़े थे, इतने अधिक प्रबल थे, तब हम इतने दुर्बल क्यों बन गए? मैं आज तक ये प्रश्न का अपने से बहुत सारे पूर्वजों से पूछ चुका हूं, मुझे आज का इसका उत्तर अभी तक नहीं मिला है। दूसरी बात यह है कि अगर उन्होंने हमारी संस्कृति और भाषा का ह्रास नहीं किया होता, तो आज हम दोनों, आप सब लोग अपनी भाषा में बोल रहे होते। वो भी नहीं बोल रहे हैं, वो आज भी है, उस गुलामी में हम आज भी हैं, और ये दुर्भाग्य की बात। दूसरा, पराग, मैं आपसे बोलना चाहूंगा भैया, ये बहुत कहना बहुत सिंपल है कि भाई घर वापसी, भाई मुझे आप बताओ कितनों की आपने घर वापसी की? कहना बहुत सिंपल है, पर उपदेश कुशल बहुतेरे जे आचरहि ते नर न घिन्ने। मेरी कृपया यह है कि कृपया अपनी संस्कृति पे आ जाएं, उसकी बात करें तो ज्यादा अच्छा। अब मुझे बताइए आप कि ये क्यों हुआ, दुर्बल हम क्यों बने? मेरा ये प्रश्न है, इसका सिंपल सा कोई आंसर दो, मुझे उत्तर दीजिए।
This is all, sorry, मैं मराठी में बोल सकता हूँ,
पर बोलो, कोई भी भारतीय भाषा में बोल दो।
नाही, मराठीमध्ये मी उत्तर बोलू शकतो, पण तुम्हाला समजेल की नाही मला
हिंदी भाषा तो जो भी बोलते हैं बड़ी टूटी फूटी बोलते हैं, उसका कोई अभिप्राय नहीं बनता है। बोलिए।
So अगर दुर्बल है,
सर आप इंग्लिश और हिंदी मिक्स करके बोलिए, ज्यादा बेटर रहेगा। मराठी में आप बोल सकते हो, लेकिन
नहीं, जो आप कह रहे हैं कि हम दुर्बल है, ये आपका विश्लेषण है, ये आपका एनालिसिस है, आपका कंक्लूजन है। मैं उससे सहमत नहीं हूं, मैं तो बिल्कुल सहमत नहीं हूं। मैं कह रहा हूं कि हमारी सिर्फ भारत, इंडिया इज द ओनली प्लेस इन द वर्ल्ड वेयर देयर इज एन अनब्रोकन कंटिन्यूटी। जो धनंजय कह रहे थे कि अगर आप पूरी अंग्रेजों को अगर देखते हैं, तो उन फ्रॉम 2000 सालों से उनपे 6 बड़े आक्रमण हुए, और हर समय उनकी संस्कृति, उनकी भाषा, उनका कल्चर, उनका पॉलिटिक्स सब बदल गया, एवरीथिंग। उनकी अगर आइडेंटिटी आप देखते हैं तो 2000 से और में कोई, देयर इज नथिंग, कुछ भी, नथिंग दैट हैज रिमेन्ड, कुछ भी। अगर आप देखते हैं कि फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई डोंट वांट टू मेक दिस इनटू अ डिस्कशन, लेट मी जस्ट मेक माय पॉइंट, राइट? इफ यू लुक एट 1867 का समय था, जहां पे there was a German archaeologist who was doing research on Troy. ट्रॉय नाम की एक ग्रीक की जो कहानी है, इलियड में ट्रॉय पे जो इन्वेजन हुआ था। सो 2-2.5 हजार सालों से ये यूरोपियंस लोग ढूंढ रहे थे कि ट्रॉय कहाँ पे है, ट्रॉय कहाँ पे है, ट्रॉय कहाँ पे है। और 1867 में किन्हीं इजमीर और टर्की के एक गांव में somebody excavated and they found कि अरे हमें ट्रॉय मिल गया, and it was a big discovery and everybody talked about it. Now 1997 में मुजफ्फराबाद डिस्ट्रिक्ट उत्तर प्रदेश में एक टीम ऑफ आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट थी, भारतीय और इटालियन आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट, एंड दे डिस्कवर्ड कि अरे हमें कौंपिल्य मिल गया। कौंपिल्य यानी द्रुपद का जो कैपिटल था, द्रौपदी के जो पिता थे द्रुपद, उनका कैपिटल था कौंपिल्य। और ये 1997 में कुछ डिस्कवरी हुई और इंडिया में it was not a big news. The question is why did it not become a big news? ये बड़ी न्यूज खबर क्यों नहीं हुई? The answer was simple. सिर्फ भारत में जो गांव का नाम था जहां पे ये एक्सकवेशन हुआ था, वो गांव का नाम था कंपल, और जो गांव के लोग कहते थे वो तो कहते थे वो कि एक छोटा सा हिल था वहां पे गांव के बाहर, उसको लोग कहते कि द्रुपद किला था. सो 5000 साल से हमें ये मालूम था कि ये द्रुपद की कैपिटल है, हमारा नाम भी कंपिल है. यू विल नॉट फाइंड दिस एनीवेयर एल्स इन द वर्ल्ड. तो मुझे तो ये प्रबलता दिखती है कि ठीक है, हम एक जो हमारा फिलॉसफी है, जो हमारा ज्ञान है, जो हमारा इतिहास है, जो हमारी कहानियां हैं, सिर्फ भारत में ही, India and India alone is the only place where we still exist this. I believe we are the only nation in the world where such things can happen. अगर ये आप दौर्बल्य समझते हैं तो ये आपकी मानसिकता है. And that is
Parag, please let me complete it now. अगर हम दास बन कर रहे हैं इतने सालों तक और अगर इसको हम प्रबलता कहते हैं तो I don't agree. मैं इससे सहमत नहीं हूँ. प्लीज, मैं नहीं हूँ सहमत. और आज मेरे बच्चों को ओम जय जगदीश भी नहीं आती है.
Can we take another question, please?
Would you like me to take Dhananjay ji, or would you like to take another question?
Samira ji, why don't you take the question?
I think please go ahead, no, Samir. Is there any other books to?
There is Mr. Bareen ji who's asked what historical records and documents are available to read more about 1946 Navy revolt.
I think there are some books which are coming out. I have not kept up to date with all the stuff that is going on right now, but I have a feeling that some stuff is coming out. I think Dhananjay.
I can answer that question specifically as far as the naval uprising of 1946 is concerned. It has not yet been declassified. There are many files which now the present government is declassifying quite a few files, but there are some very important files today, those pertaining to Lal Bahadur Shastri or those pertaining to Netaji also, and in that also the naval uprising is also there. These files are not yet declassified. So currently the source of information for us still happens to be only newspaper reports, and sometimes in the National Archives of UK. In the National Archives of UK, some of that which has been declassified is partially available as far as the naval uprising is concerned. As far as 1857 is concerned, when we were researching for the book Operation Red Lotus, when we were researching this, there is plenty of literature available right from National Archives, where there's correspondence that happens between regiments, or between, and there are a whole lot of Urdu letters that were discovered. So there is a huge body of evidence that's available in the public domain as far as 1857 is concerned. Putting it together was a mammoth effort. बहुत कठिनाइयों के साथ इसको जोड़ा है, लेकिन ये available है. अगर कोई पढ़ना चाहता है तो you can go directly to the source of it. As far as 1946 is concerned, short answer is not yet. These files are not yet been declassified, and we have very, very limited number of people who are still living, those who have witnessed the naval uprising of 1946. One of them whom I mentioned just now was Commander Pandit, who is 97-year-old, God bless him with long life. He's 97-year-old, and he has pretty strong memories about 1946. So these become our sources till the time the files are declassified and we actually figure out what is given in those files.
Well, fantastic. I'm sure we've got a lot of resource information also, which could be like, additional recommendations for study, for research, for many who have been, a very value and insightful audience today, because many come with that core interest of studying history for sure. And One of them has also always been Sandeep Shetty, who I think should take the final question, which he's put on the chat box. But Sandeep ji, aap khud पूछना चाहेंगे then that, because we can and then maybe conclude the session today after this finale question.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Dhananjaya sir and Parag ji. They both are doing a wonderful job, and they are inspiration for people like me, because wherever I take presentations, I have always put the slides of the, Operation Red Lotus and Naval Uprising. And I really am so inspired by the positive attitude of both of them, and I wish them luck. And my question is to Parag sir, is there any plans to make movie on Operation Red Lotus so that we can reach wider audience?
So the book is in public domain. Anybody who wants to make a movie is welcome to contact us, and then we'll be happy to discuss that with them. So if you want to produce a movie, I will be happy to talk to you.
Okay. Hopefully, God willing, let's see. Maybe it will happen soon. And
I'm sure with these days today, with so many series also coming up, you never know whether it's just going to be one of the Netflix or Amazon Prime coming up and taking up. But then, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a proud moment for all of us having such an important subject in front of a larger audience, the world at large, through this channel. So let's hope
I have
that
one
it
last
will.
question to Parag ji and Dhananjaya sir both. They both are not from this domain of research and everything. So what inspired them? Because 4 years of research on Operation Red Lotus, and how Parag sir did it, because definitely he would have his personal profession also to take care of, and what inspired him, and because through the question and answers, I saw the way he's very positive, and so I just wanted to know what inspired him and what kept him going for his research work.
So inspiration was my sister. She challenged, Dhananjay's wife is my sister, so Rupa. So she challenged, but this was back in 2006, where the 150th anniversary of 1857 was going to be observed. And it was going to be the same old history that was going to be written. So Rupa said that, Parag, why don't you write a book and we'll all help you do the research. So luckily, they were my research team, my sister Rupa, sister-in-law Nandita, Dhananjay, Rajesh, my brother, my dad was alive that time, PK Tope. They were all my research team. And because of their help, we were able to do this extensive research and publish the book in 2010.
See, my answer here, Sandeep ji, my answer here is, I think now today we are seeing a very different mood in our country where people want to know their history. Because ये जो हमारा इतिहास जो लिखा गया है, ये कुछ हजम नहीं हो रहा है, डाइजेस्ट नहीं हो रहा है, right? ये हमारी फितरत ऐसी नहीं है, नहीं, जो हमें बोला गया है वैसे हमारी फितरत नहीं है. तो मैं युवा पीढ़ी में खास करके ये देखता हूँ कि इसमें अपना इतिहास जानने की एक उत्सुकता है, और अगर ये उत्सुकता आप में प्रबल है तो most of this information is available in the public domain. It is available in many art forms, like Samira and me were discussing the other days. They're available in many art forms. You just need to join the dots. Nobody is going to give you, Sandeep, nobody is going to give you a ready-made book that this is the actual history. Nobody is going to do that. So हमारा जो ये प्रयास शुरू हुआ, ये छोटी छोटी घटनाओं के साथ ही शुरू हुआ, और उसमें हम जब ज्यादा खोदते गए, अरे ये भी हमें मालूम नहीं था, अरे ये भी हमें मालूम नहीं था, ऐसे करके एक एक करके जैसे माला में ये जोड़ते हैं वैसे हम जोड़ते गए, और उस हिसाब से ये पुस्तक जो परग जी का पुस्तक बना हुआ है, ऑपरेशन रेड लोटस, वो इस तरीके से बना है. सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू, like, we all are working professionals here. We are not paid for doing research or anything like that. We spent our own money. We took out time from our jobs. तो छुट्टी में गोवा में जाके अपने समुद्री करने के बजाय हम लोग यहाँ वहाँ आर्काइव्स में घूमते थे, भोपाल में गए थे या कहीं और. अनेक पराग जी और उनके भाई जो है राजेश जी जो है, वो अनेक जगह में, राजस्थान में जो तात्या टोपे की कर्मभूमि रही है, अनेक छोटे छोटे गांवों कस्बों में ये इतिहास अभी भी बोला जाता है। ये सिर्फ सिटीज में नहीं आया है, किसी किताब में नहीं आया है, लेकिन ये हिसाब अभी भी लोगों की मेमोरी में है। ये लोग जो वहाँ के जो लोकगीत, लोक संगीत है, हमारे लोक संगीत इज अ वेरी रिच सोर्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री। सो ये हमारे जो लोक संगीत में जो ये परंपरा है, मौखिक परंपरा है, इनमें ये सारे हीरे छुपे हुए हैं। ये हीरो को हमने निकाल के लोगों के सामने उजागर करना है, यही करना है।
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I am sure आपकी बातों से बहुत सारे लोगों को प्रेरणा मिली है, बहुत सारे लोग, many have got inspired. There's a lot of applaud, lot of appreciation coming even on the chat box for both of you. I mean, people saying hats off to the entire work that's being done. So I'm sure it's amazing, and it's been that entire family. Many of your family members also are in the audience today. I saw Amol ji and Rajesh ji, who are a part of this conversation with all of us. So thanking both of you on behalf of Bhavyata Foundation, and of course everyone. If there are any like concluding words which I would say would trigger a beginning again for both of you, if you want to say something, yes.
No, I mean, I have only one thing to say, and I'm carrying forward the philosophy of which Parag wants to continue, and which is why I'm advocating that history hum sabki hai, itihas hum sabka hai. Please take it forward. History does not belong to the government, does not belong to books. It belongs to all of us. So please take it forward in your own way.
I agree with that. That's a perfect sentiment. Thank you all.
I'm sure with this, with lots of applause, and thank you on behalf of Bhavyata Foundation for everyone in the audience to be, and two great eminent personalities and really motivational speakers, I would say, because to be continuing to the task that you did in writing this book, doing the research, being self-motivated and continuing with so much energy. And still in your talk, I could even, like get that electrifying energy, I would say. So thank you for being there with us, Parag ji. Thank you, Dhananjaya ji. Looking forward to meeting back again very soon. With this, we please conclude.
Thank you.
So with your permission, can I please conclude the session?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bhavyata Foundation, for giving us this opportunity. Right? Dhanyawad ji.
Thank you.
Dhanyawad.